want you to notice this morning the passage of Scripture that is found on the screen behind me. The backslider in heart shall be filled with his own ways. That particular passage is found in Proverbs 14:14. And notice the one who is backsliding needs to do what? He needs to make a major turnaround because he is going the wrong way. There was a man who was driving down the freeway, and his wife called him. And when he answered, she said, "Honey, I want to tell you, you need to be careful out there. I just heard on the news that there is a man who is driving down the wrong side of the road." And the man said to his wife, he said, "Well, honey, I want to tell you, it's not just one car. There are hundreds of cars right now that are driving down the wrong side of the road." Now, that reminds me of a backslider. He doesn't always know what he's doing, right? He thinks he's going in the right direction, perhaps, but he's not. He's going in the wrong direction, and he needs to make a major turnaround. Now, the backslider in heart does not set out to leave God. He's not like the prodigal of Luke 15, who anxiously desired to get out of his father's house and travel to the far country. No, what happens to the backslider happens slowly over a period of time. And it could be that even some of us have backslidden in heart, and therefore we want to be very, very careful that we examine ourselves to make sure that that has not happened to us. Now, the end result of a backslider may very well be like the prodigal. Listen to what God said to the children of Israel, Isaiah 1:4, "O sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord. They've provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger." Listen to this. "They are gone away backward." They've gone away backward. Now, that did not happen to God's people overnight, did it? But over a period of time, they began to turn their backs upon God and ultimately had completely left Him. Now, God's people can be guilty of backsliding. And those of us who gather here this morning, we want to be known as the people of God. We want to be known as faithful. We do not want to be called His backslidden children. Now, who is it that can backslide? Well, individuals can backslide, can't they? In families, we find that there are members who backslide. For example, a father may be faithful for a while and then he backslides. Same could be true for a mother. Sometimes children who are reared in a loving Christian home and given good principles, they obey the gospel, but later on those children will backslide for a period of time. Did you know that congregations can backslide? There are congregations all across America who were once faithful to our Lord Jesus Christ, but for whatever reason, they began to depart from the clear instructions set forth in the New Testament. They have backslidden. In fact, our Lord Jesus Christ spoke to some of those congregations as recorded in Revelation 2 and 3. Revelation chapters 2 and 3. And so congregations can backslide. Nations can backslide. There are nations who for a period of time will follow the principles that God has given for nations, but over a period of time they become very corrupt. They depart from those principles, and therefore they have backslidden. Now, why would anybody ever want to backslide? Why would a child of God want to backslide? Well, here are some of the reasons as to why that happens. Busyness, okay? Busyness. We just get busy, and therefore when we get busy, what happens? We sometimes have misplaced priorities, don't we? And so the one who has backslidden is one who has misplaced priorities. Loving pleasure more than loving God will cause some to backslide. A backslider is one who has a divided heart, doesn't he? There's a part of him that says, I want to love God, I want to follow God, but oh, I am so attracted to the things that are around me. Now, here is an enemy that we have as Christians, and we need to understand it. The world is our enemy. 1 John 2:15, John says, do not love this world. What's he talking about? He's talking about an ungodly system that has a prince who is called the devil. That same world has a philosophy, doesn't it? It not only has a prince and a philosophy, it has a people, doesn't it? And it's drawing us to it. It seems so attractive. In fact, you could call it your friendly enemy because it just seems so innocuous. It's drawing us to it. And we get as close as we can sometimes to it because it doesn't seem like in any way that it will harm us. And so John would go on to write that the whole world, that whole system, lies in wickedness or the bosom of the wicked one. And what does that tell us? This enemy that seems so friendly is not only dangerous, but likewise it is deadly. Now I want to talk to you this morning about a man who I believe epitomizes the backslider. He has a simple name, just 3 letters, L-O-T, Lot. Lot. I believe he epitomizes the backslider. And I think when you study or you examine the life of Lot, you can see how someone easily can move away from his God. I believe that in the story of Lot, you have 4 changes, 4 metamorphic changes that take place over a period of time. And I want us to notice those this morning and see if we can relate to what we learn from the life of Lot. I want you to notice, first of all, that Lot was first in a state of opposition toward the world. You see, the backslider is following the world. At one time, Lot was not following the world. He was living in a state of opposition toward that world around him. Do you know why? Because he was protected by a patriarch by the name of Abraham. Does it matter with whom we surround ourselves? Absolutely. It would be good for every one of us to notice those who've gone before us, who are still alive, who are still producing good fruit, who still have a great influence. Let's know those people who've gone on ahead of us, who are still walking ahead of us, who have been faithful to God, and let's surround ourselves with them, all right? Because that will serve as a protection. Now, I want you to go back to Genesis 12 with me this morning as we study the life of Lot, and I want you to notice who this man was. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. Abraham was the son of a man named Terah, and Terah had several sons, and one of those sons was Abraham. Another son was named Haran, and Haran was the father of Lot. Well, Haran died, and Abraham very lovingly and kindly took Lot under his wing, which would have been expected to do, to take place. And I want to tell you this, though Lot lost his father, he was blessed to have Abraham, wasn't he? He was blessed to have Abraham. Now, I want you to notice in chapter 12 at verse 4, Abram departed as the Lord had spoken unto him. Now underscore this, and Lot went with him. And Lot went with him. When Abram was told to leave his family, who went with him? Lot went with him. What a blessing to know that you can live your life under the guidance and the counsel of the father of the faithful, Abraham. Lot went with him. Now, a famine arose in the land, and as a result of that famine, Abraham finds himself down in Egypt. But in chapter 13, he then leaves Egypt to go back to Canaan. He's been very, very blessed. And verse 5 says this, and Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents. Now, who left Egypt with Abram? Lot did. What I'm saying is this, Lot, at this particular time in his life, was living in opposition to the world around him, because the faithful child of God always lives in opposition to the world around him, okay? He's living in opposition to the world around him. So we have Lot Lot being protected by Father Abraham. He is in opposition to the world around him, just like his uncle Abraham. But I want you to notice something else. As one backslides, he moves from opposition to the world around him to toleration, doesn't he? He moves from opposition to toleration. Now, Abraham and Lot both had herdsmen. After all, they were very, very rich. Now, Abraham is the patriarch. Lot should be subservient to Abraham. But Abraham, being the magnanimous man that he is, has blessed Lot. He has allowed Lot to also prosper right along with him. And when this strife between herdmen appear, then Abraham says, let's resolve it. Abraham says, here's what I want to do. I'm going to take the better part of the land and just good luck to you, Lot. No, that's not what he said, is it? Abraham said to Lot, you take what's before. You choose first. You take what it is that you want. And here's where we start learning something about Lot, don't we? That although Lot had enjoyed living in the presence of Abraham, he now has a decision to make. They are going to separate somewhat. Lot is going to take his herdmen and his business to one part of the land, and Abraham can go in the other direction, and that way they will keep peace. Lot does not say, well, Uncle Abe, you choose what you want. I'll follow after you. He doesn't say, well, I'll tell you what I need to do first of all is pray about this. No, he doesn't do that. I want you to notice the decision that Lot made beginning in verse 10 of chapter 13 of Genesis. And Lot lifted up his eyes and beheld all the plain of Jordan, and it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, the reason that phrase is there, destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, Moses would record this some hundreds of years later. All right? And so we've not gotten to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah just yet. But it's going to happen. So the text reads, it was before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. Now underscore that. He pitched his tent toward Sodom. That is a bad decision, and it's the decision of a backslider. He pitched his tent toward Sodom, but the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. Would Abraham and Lot known this? Of course they knew this. Of course they knew this. But Lot chose to do this anyway. Now this is significant in verse 14. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him. Just pause right there. All of a sudden, God is speaking to Abraham, but Lot no longer has that protection that comes from being at the side of Abraham. When did the Lord come to Abraham? After Lot left. Lot is now traveling on dangerous ground. He is going somewhere without the blessing of the Lord. By pitching his tent towards Sodom, what is he saying? I know Sodom's a wicked city, but I'll tolerate it. I'm not going all the way into the city. We're just going to get close by. Because you see, Lot wanted to prosper, and he saw ways to make money if he pitched his tent towards Sodom. I'm not going to get that close. And that reminds me of one who backslides. The backslider of heart is one who starts asking questions like this. How close can I get to sin without sinning? It is a person like Lot who will say something along these lines. If I do this, will it be wrong? Is that really what a Christian ought to ask? Do we spend our days just asking, how close can I get to something that's wrong without sinning? Or am I more interested in my relationship with God prospering? You see, the best thing that could have ever happened with Lot was to stay as close to Abraham as he possibly could and to be as far away from Sodom as he possibly could have been. But you see, he has left that state of opposition, which came by being surrounded with the faith and the righteousness of Abraham, he's now moved into a state of toleration. I think that despite the wickedness of Sodom, I'll be able to handle it. Put this verse down, Proverbs 6:27. Can a man take fire into his bosom and not be burned? The answer is no, he cannot. And at this particular time in the life of Lot, what is he doing? He's playing with fire. And he's going to be burned. But then we find that Lot moves to another state. He goes from the state of opposition to the state of toleration. Now he comes to the state of acceptance. In Genesis 14, we have, according to verse 12, Lot living in Sodom. Now, that's important. They took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. Who took Lot? Well, it seems to me that Sodom and Gomorrah evidently were subservient to a king by the name of Kedorlaomer. And obviously they paid tribute to him, and as long as they did that, they were left alone. But according to Genesis 14, the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah decided to rebel. And of course, Kedorlaomer does not like that. And he puts together a confederation of nations, and they come and attack Sodom and Gomorrah. And not only that, according to verse 12 of Genesis 14, they take Lot and all of his goods. But notice in that particular text that Lot is no longer living on the outskirts of Sodom. He's living where? In Sodom. He's moved on in. He's gone from a state of opposition to the world around him, moving to a state of toleration. I'll tolerate Sodom. Now he's living in Sodom. He's now just accepted the fact that this is how some people live. So I'll be all right. I can surround myself with all these people. I won't give them any problem. I can still be true to my Lord. And notice, when the enemy came, they took Lot and all of his goods. That's what sin does, doesn't it? The backslider will find that his character will be plundered whenever he gets this close to the friendly enemy. Do you know what it took for Abraham, or rather for Lot, to be freed from his captors? It took Abraham, who heard about what had happened, getting his own militia together, some 300 plus servants, really soldiers, who went out to Kedorlaomer, and they successfully took back Lot and delivered the goods that were stolen to the king of Sodom. Now, you know what the king of Sodom wanted to do then? The king of Sodom then wanted Abraham to take the goods for being so kind toward Sodom. But notice in Genesis chapter 14, Abram would not do it. Abram said to the king of Sodom, I've lifted up mine hand unto the Lord, the Most High God, the possessor of heaven and earth, that I will not take from a thread even to a shoe latchet, and that I will not take anything that is thine, lest thou shouldst say, I've made Abram rich. Abram understood the friendly enemy, didn't he? He knew that would be dangerous. He's not in fellowship with that king in any way whatsoever. Now, surely this is the time when Lot will say, you know, I've been here long enough. I've had young men come to the school of preaching, and I said, tell me a little bit about your background. And you ought to hear their story. And they've been involved in everything under the sun that was wrong. And some of those young men will say, Brother Grider, I'll tell you what, though, I got in all kinds of trouble because of my actions, and I decided it was time to straighten up and fly right, and I'm here in the school of preaching to do the Lord's work. Isn't that great? Wouldn't this have been a wonderful occasion for Lot to say to his uncle, I've done wrong. I don't need to be here. I need to get out of this place. Allow me to come back. I will put my herdsman under your herdsman. We'll get along. Just let me come back. And you know Abraham would have said, come on back. Come on back. We got to get you out of here. But did Lot do that? No. When Lot is freed from Kedar Laomer, Lot goes right back to Sodom. It didn't make a difference to him. It didn't cause him to leave his precious Sodom. And so several chapters later, we run into Lot again. Now let's go to Genesis 19. Because you see, in Genesis 19, we find out that Lot has gone from opposition to the world, to tolerating the world, to accepting the world, to now celebrating it. Look at Genesis 19:1. And there came two angels to Sodom at even. Those two angels had been with Abraham, hadn't they? There came two angels to Sodom at even, and Lot sat in the gate of Sodom. He has gone from living far away from Sodom to pitching his tent toward Sodom to now living in Sodom and being a reputable leader in Sodom. You see, sitting at the gate of Sodom doesn't mean that he was just standing there or sitting there welcoming people into Sodom. He's not like a greeter at Walmart, okay? No, he's like an official now in Sodom. He's like a judge in Sodom. He's a Sodomite VIP. That's who Lot is. And now he is living in this city, and he's associating with all those around him, and he has become somebody well known in the city. And then these two angels appear, and he wants to be hospitable to them. He hasn't lost that. Come to my place, stay at my place, visit with me. And so notice what happens as this particular story turns ever so sordid. He said, Behold now, my lords, turn in, I pray you, into your servant's house. Tarry all night. Watch your feet. Ye shall rise up early, go your ways. You see, he's still a nice man. He says, you come in here and abide. He said, don't stay out in the street. They said, we'll stay out in the street. No, you won't. You need to come in. And so they did. They came into his home. And then something unimaginable happens. This is Sodom, remember, from which we get the word sodomy. Before they lay down, the men of the city, even the men of Sodom, compassed the house round, both old and young, all the people from every quarter. And they called unto Lot and said unto him, Where are the men which came into thee this night? Bring them out unto us, that we may know them. That's the King James polite way of saying they wanted them in a sexually promiscuous, abominable way. Bring them out that we may know them. And Lot went out at the door unto them and shut the door after him and said, I pray you, brethren, do not so wickedly. Behold, now I have two daughters which have not known man. Let me, I pray you, bring them out unto you, and do ye to them as is good in your eyes. Only unto these men do nothing, for therefore they came under the shadow of my roof. Are you kidding me? That's the best you can do, Lot? You have so compromised yourself in this place called Sodom. You say, please don't do this to these strangers, but I tell you what, I have two daughters. You know them. Oh, the trouble we find ourselves when we start flirting with this old world. Here is Lot, a man who had been reared under faithful Abraham, now in a city that's beset with the most grievous sin. And those who come to him guilty of engaging in sodomy, which we know today is homosexuality, comes into him and says, you bring these men out, we want to know them. Oh, don't do this wicked deed. This wicked deed? Don't do this wicked deed, let's just do this wicked deed. You can have my daughters. That's how sordid this has become. But I want to tell you something. Lot had lost any influence he ever had for good. They had nothing but contempt for this man. Look at verse 9. And they said, stand back. They said again, this one fella came in to sojourn, and he will needs be a judge. Now will we deal worse with thee than with him? And they pressed sore upon the man, even Lot, and Lot came near to break the door. And the angels had to pull him back in. By the way, that's how mean and intolerant these abominable kind of people can be. You see, it wasn't enough any longer for Lot to tolerate their sin or accept it. They had to celebrate it. Bring those men out so we can know them. This is a man who has compromised himself, and thus all respect is gone. They said, you come in here like you're a judge over us. We don't have any regard for what you're saying. Somebody says, but Brother Grider, did Lot really celebrate what was going on in Sodom? I don't know that he celebrated it, because I know of a particular passage in the New Testament that says something about Lot that needs to be considered in the midst of all of this. In 2 Peter chapter 2, at verse 7, the text says that God delivered just Lot. Just doesn't mean just him alone, it means righteous Lot. God delivered righteous Lot, who was vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. What does that mean? Here is a man who knew better than being in the midst of a city like Sodom. He was a man who had developed an association with God, a relationship with Him, but he'd backslidden. And now his whole soul is conflicted. Who's the most miserable man on the face of the earth? It's not the person who does not accept God, who has no need for God, who resents the idea of God. That's not the most miserable. The most miserable is not the faithful child of God. It's the one who's sitting on the fence, who cannot make up his mind. That's Lot. And so here is Lot in the midst of this city. He has compromised himself, and he's torn on the inside. I'm convinced he couldn't even sleep. He does not even know what to do. You think Abraham had trouble making decisions back where he was? Lot can't make any decisions any longer. No, he can't. I remember on an occasion I was in Washington, D.C. I was a summer intern in 1983, 18 years old. Some fellows one night said, we're going to go over to Georgetown tonight and have a little fun. Georgetown, exclusive part of the Washington, D.C. area, a lot of nightlife. I said, you want to go along with us? I said, sure, I'll go along. We're going to go over and do a little sightseeing, I guess, over in Georgetown. That's not what they had in mind. I went with them, and I found myself in a place that particular evening that made me very, very uncomfortable. As I sat with them enjoying all of their shenanigans, I became miserable. This was not the place where I was supposed to be. I was conflicted. I was torn. What do I do? I'm not supposed to be in this place. I can't enjoy this. Till finally I excused myself and I took a cab and I went back to the college where we were staying. I went in the darkness of that dorm room, and there I bowed my head before God. I don't know if I sinned or not. I asked God to forgive me. All I'm telling you is, in that particular moment, I was so conflicted, I was so torn, my spirit was vexed, because that's not where I was supposed to be, and I knew it. And so the problem with Lot was not with his head, it was with his heart. The problem with Lot was not that he was a deviant, but he was negligent. The problem with Lot was not that he was wanton, but that he was weak. He had backslidden, and he backslid right into Sodom, and it cost him. How did it cost him? Well, Sodom cost him his reputation, didn't it? It cost him his reputation. There was a religious leader in this country who died several years ago. He was hated by many. I mean, there were many people who hated him because of the moral principles that he espoused. And in a time in our country when we're going in the opposite direction from God and from abiding in righteous principles, this man was still defending such, and so he was hated. When he died, many laughed. When he died, many expressed satisfaction. That's how hardened they were, how callous they were. This man's now gone from the scene. It's wonderful. But there was one man who was interviewed on television who oftentimes found himself on the opposite side of this religious figure. They oftentimes would appear in discussion and debate. But here's what that man of an opposite view said about this religious man. He said, I'll tell you something, he was honest. He said, I have to give him credit. He said he believed in what he said. And I have to tell you, when you met him, he was a gentleman. He was opposed to the man and his ideas, but he couldn't argue against his life, could he? But Lot lost his reputation. They didn't have any respect for him whatsoever, nothing but contempt. It not only cost him his reputation, it cost him his family. It cost him his family. Because you see, the angels want to know, who do you have here with you? Well, I know this. Lot took his wife with him out of the city, and Lot took his 2 daughters out of the city. The sons-in-law evidently didn't go because when Lot spoke to them, they mocked him. We're not leaving here. We're not going with you. Instead of respecting him, they mocked him. And then as they leave Sodom and God begins to rain down fire and brimstone upon Sodom, what does Lot's wife do? She looked back. She looked back upon that precious city that she'd loved so much. And Luke 17:32, Jesus said, you remember Lot's wife, as a word of warning. She turned into a pillar of salt. I believe she's in hell to this very hour because she was so in love with that city called Sodom. Those daughters of Lot, all you have to do is just continue reading the account in Genesis 19. They got into a mountain, got to a cave in a mountain, and got their father drunken, committing incestual relations with their father. Lot became the father of a race known as the Moabites and the Ammonites, always in opposition to God's family. What I'm telling you is this: Lot lost his reputation and he lost his family. He lost them. Generations after would not honor God, not the descendants of Lot. He lost his family. They did celebrate that city, you see. Lot's wife celebrated it. She loved society in Sodom. No doubt that Lot's girls went to Sodom High, dated the boys of Sodom High. If they ever had a little religious service there in the home of Lot, you could guarantee that the kids would be sitting there texting other people, playing games on their phone. Why? They had no interest in God. None. It's part of a backslidden family. That's what it was. And Lot was responsible. It cost him his reputation. It cost him his family. It cost him a clear conscience. It cost him a relationship with God Almighty. Because what was Abraham doing during this whole time that Lot was down in Sodom? Abraham's back there praying to God, saying, deliver the city. Don't let it be destroyed. And God said to Abraham, he says, I'll tell you something, Abraham, I love you, I respect you. If you can find 10 righteous people, I'll save it. Lot couldn't do what Abraham was doing. This is the digressive nature of sin, unlike anything I've ever read in the Bible. Here's how the psalmist begins the book of Psalms. He's talking about the godly man in contrast to the evil man. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and his law doth he meditate day and night. Did you see that digressive nature of the man who's ungodly? Walking, and then standing, and then sitting. Lot, sitting in Sodom, describes that man. Benjamin Disraeli was one of the most prominent British prime ministers ever. He was an empire builder and served during that glorious Victorian period of the 19th century. He was to 19th century Britons what Churchill was to those in the 20th century. But when he came to the end of his life, here's what Disraeli said. Regarding life, it's nothing but vanity. He says, youth is a mistake, middle age is a struggle, and old age is regret. That's how it is when you don't have God, isn't it? Youth is a mistake. Midlife, a struggle. Old age, regret. You live your life without the Lord and all is vanity. I remember hearing of a couple who got married, and when they got married, they forgot God. Preacher would go visit them, and they said, one of these days we'll be back. They had children. The preacher went back to visit them again. They said, well, Yeah, we know we ought to have those children in church, but one day we'll come back. Finally, years later, Sunday evening, preacher who'd been there for so many years extended the Lord's invitation like he always did. He goes down to the front of the auditorium to receive anyone who will come forward. There came that couple, now gray-headed. Here came that couple, now ready for retirement. They were seated there on the front row. You know what they said to the preacher? Said, "We're finally coming, but we're coming too late." Oh, you're not coming too late. You still got time. You can get right with God. That's not what they meant. We're coming too late to save our children. They have no interest. We didn't teach them. We're coming too late to save our reputations. We're coming too late to have brought many souls to Christ. That's what they meant when they said we're coming too late. They had backslidden. Now, just for a moment, I want you to think about a backsliding nation. And think about these four metamorphic stages we talked about this morning. In America, I'm not sure so much that television has influenced us as much as we've influenced television. Maybe it's just a microcosm. Television may be just a microcosm of who we are, reflecting who we are. There was a time when it came to morality and decency, upholding family and family values, that television reflected that. You can go back to the 1950s and consider what was television programming then. Oh, programs that uplifted the family unit. Mom, dad, the kids. Father knows best. Leave it to Beaver. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. But in the 60s and the 70s, we moved away from opposition to the principles that brought nations low. We moved away from oppositions toward toleration. Think about how TV reflected that. We had the situation comedy, such as All in the Family, which began to talk about the social norms and discrediting them, where you had a fellow on there who was bitter and bigoted by the name of Archie Bunker. What was Archie? He was a conservative. He had to look bad. He represented the normal way of thinking, so we've got to make him look bitter and bigoted. But the liberal Mike Stivic was the intellectual. He is the one who had come around. He understood what life was really about, how that change needed to take place in the way we viewed social norms. Then there was a show called Three's Company in the late 70s, and what happened in that show was this. We had two women and a man who were living together, and the only way that they could live in the same apartment is to convince the renter of the apartment that he was gay. John Ritter played that role, you remember. And he was always getting himself into always complex situations based on the fact that he was supposed to be a gay character. And so what happened? We laughed. Because the devil knows something very, very important. If he can ever get us to laugh at something, we won't take it seriously. So then we move into the 80s and the 90s. We go from opposition to something, to toleration of something, to acceptance. Now they were these dramatic productions, television programs, movies, where those who were attracted to the same gender were seen in a different light. Romanticism, dramatic. This needs to be accepted, so we were told. An alternative lifestyle. Yours is okay, but this one's all right too. And so the population is being moved toward what? Accepting something that God all the time says is abominable and wrong and sodomy. And then after the turn of the century, what happens? It's no longer opposition or even toleration or acceptance. It's full-scale celebration. Even to the point that the Supreme Court of the United States, supposedly the best legal minds that could be found anywhere, say, indeed, those of same gender can get married. And when that event occurs, the White House is bathed in colors of the rainbow. Well, they've even hijacked the symbol that God gave to Noah as a reminder of his promise not to destroy the world again, and they've taken that, stolen it out of the pages of the Bible and made it for themselves. Now here's the point. When we backslide, we go from opposition to something, to toleration, to acceptance, to celebration. And what happened in Sodom? They paid a price. a heavy price. And so I'm reminded of something David said, and he knew it all too well. Psalm 38:2. For your arrows have sunk deep into me, and your hand has pressed down on me. David had committed grievous sin in the sight of God, and he felt the chastening hand of God. That must have been where Lot was, there in Sodom. As he was taken out of that city, almost forced by the angels. His wife looked back. He got drunk. His daughters did their dastardly deed. He must have felt the divine chastening of the Lord. Surely somewhere at some time he said, why did I come to this place? That's what happens to the one who backslides in heart. He will ultimately say, why did I come to this place? You see, this didn't happen to Abraham. He remained faithful, didn't he? He prospered all along. He was protected all along. He was at peace all along. And so it is for the faithful child of God. Spiritually, he prospers when he's faithful. He's protected by the hand of God when he's faithful. He has peace within when he's faithful. He has no regret about what he's done or where he's been because he's been faithful to God. But I'll tell you this. I expect to one day meet Lot. You do? I want to believe that. I want to believe that Lot got right with God and that we'll meet him in heaven one day. Somebody says, well, that's all that really matters, isn't it? Isn't that all that really matters, is that Lot eventually got right with God and went on to heaven? Is that really all that matters? Does it not matter that in heaven Lot has no children? That he has no family members? Does it not matter that Lot's in heaven with no converts? That doesn't matter? I'll tell you, friends, I don't want to die like that. I don't want to die having no trophy to lay at my master's feet. I don't want to die that way. I think right now in the paradise of God, if you could sit down and talk with Lot, Lot would say this. I want to tell you something. If you're going the wrong way, then you better take a turn quickly. Because no doubt when Lot reflected upon his life, he probably said, I should have stayed a lot closer to Abraham and never pitched my tent toward Sodom. Oh, when I pitched my tent toward Sodom, I shouldn't have gone on in there to live. Oh, when I got in there to live, I shouldn't have tried to become a reputable citizen in that wicked land. I shouldn't have done it. Shouldn't have done it. But he did. And such is the picture of the backslidden Christian. We better not forget. Could it be that here this morning, in heart, someone has backslidden? Your heart is not right with God. I don't know. You got to examine yourself, and so do I. Is my heart right with God? I'll tell you this. If you're here this morning, you're backslidden, you're in the right place. You need to be here. Because right now you can do something about it. You can heed these words behind me, the words that Lot would speak to you. If you're on a dangerous path, if you're going the wrong way, turn around. That's called repentance. And do it as quickly as possible. Get back right with God. And then if you're not a child of God, don't live in this old sin-cursed, darkened world without God. And without the knowledge that you're covered in the blood of Jesus, who died on a cross to save your soul. Come to him this morning in his appointed way as a penitent believer. Come, confessing his name, and be baptized. He'll forgive your sins. And you can walk with him, going in the right direction, traveling the proper path. Not only will heaven be your home, but you're going to be blessed, even now, because of the decision that you have made. Think about that as together we stand and sing.